040 said S. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is a sad fact that Georgia needs this legislation, but it does. Last year, over 160 people in Georgia lost their lives to domestic violence. Thousands more were intimidated, threatened, harassed, and abused every day in their homes and in their close relationships. Where they ought to feel safe and loved, they instead often feel afraid and without hope. I've spoken to many of you in here and in this building that support this legislation. Some are concerned parents and grandparents, and some are survivors of domestic violence who work right here with us under the Gold Dome. And honestly, there were a few that came to speak to me about it that I had no idea that this had been an issue that they had suffered through and survived. But they've spoken to me about it. And I've also spoken with multiple directors of domestic violence and sexual assault centers who do support this legislation and feel confident it will save lives. And I do want to mention that Tennessee did create the first domestic violence registry in the nation last year. It just went online January 1st of this year. And it was created after a woman named Savannah Puckett was killed by her ex-boyfriend, who had a history of domestic violence against multiple women, and he did plead guilty to Savannah's murder. She was the inspiration for the Tennessee legislation, and I did want to make sure I mentioned her today. So this legislation creates within the GBI a searchable registry of recidivist domestic violence offenders. In this legislation, we're very careful to specify what information shall and shall not be included. And the goal there was to make sure that we provide relevant information to a person that's using the registry while also protecting the privacy of the offender and family members of the offender. So upon the second conviction for domestic violence, an offender would be placed on the registry. And then this offender would automatically be removed from the registry 5 years after the second conviction and 10 years after the third and subsequent convictions. And it applies only to convictions, not arrests. I want to make sure that we're very clear about that. And it also only applies to offenders that are convicted of a second or subsequent offense after January 1st of 2027. So going forward with a second or subsequent offense. There are a few exceptions to this two conviction rule. Those would be a plea of NOLO for a domestic violence offense, first offender plea for a domestic violence offense, and also a domestic violence offense discharged after pretrial diversion programs. So that's what it does. And I understand that there are some amendments that need to be made but Madam Chair, that's the bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about it if there are no.
Thank you, Chair Lady. We have a few questions. Chairman Leverett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Chairman Hagan, my reading of this is the Manolos and the first offenders and the pretrial diversion aren't exceptions, they count. So if you plead NOLO or if you enter a pretrial diversion program, that's one conviction.
For the purposes of this legislation.
Statute, yes.
For the purposes of the registry, that's right.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Representative Neal.
Thank you to the chair. Thank you to the author for the bill. And I'm not, unless you kind of walk through the changes, I'm just going to tell you what I see and you advise as to what the substitute changes are. So you referenced Tennessee. And Tennessee, how they differ from Georgia is they define domestic violence as a standalone. And then they also define domestic assault victim as a standalone. So in trying to capture a certain group, they can capture that group. And because Georgia has Ours is like, you know, in addition to whatever the crime plus family violence, whatever the crime plus family violence, my fear is us grabbing too many people that don't necessarily fit. And so that's why I didn't know if your new substitute addressed that or not.
It does, but I think we may need some clarification on that there.
Okay,
We have here family violence and dating violence.
right.
And I think that might be something that is going to come up here in
Okay.
discussion. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Number 14, is that Chairman Gullett?
Thank you. Thank you for the bill. I know you and I've talked a little bit about it. Do you ever get in touch with the Georgia family?
No, I
Commission
haven't been able to
Violence?
talk to them yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Chairman Hagan, this cover family violence and domestic violence.
It on line 38, where I think this might be the best place for where it's covered. Line 38, it specifies the code sections for family violence and for dating violence as who the victim in this case would be. I think it's line 36. Okay. Whatever it is, I've got my notes on the old sub. So what 30, which one did you say? 36. 38.
Well, somebody gets in a fight, and I'll throw this hypothetical out there. Somebody gets in a fight at a family reunion or at Thanksgiving over a bad call on a touchdown out playing touch football in the backyard. Let's just say these cousins don't like each other, and the cousin that was the alleged victim goes and files charges against them. And then a conviction for simple battery comes about because of this. Would you anticipate them having to register?
I wouldn't. If there's something we need to clear up to make sure that that's not what we're discussing, I'll be happy to. Well, is that something that would be considered domestic violence? That would be as family violence. Well, what I mean, I certainly don't think that's our intent here.
Okay.
No, not in any way,
Okay. It's just
but it's a good question.
having some practice in this area. There's a lot of code sections that are affected by this. But Chairman Crowe, you had a question?
I don't know if it's a question or maybe just a point added on to yours. The 1913-1 is pretty broad, and all of those crimes that are defined under there that could fall under the Family Violence Act, the people who are subject to that are brother, sister, anybody who has lived in the same home in the past. So, I mean, it's a real wide ranging group of people. And I know what your intent is, and I'm extremely supportive of that. I just think that we may need to tighten up the definition just a tad, because that one is pretty broad, and could get somebody, if you have two brothers or, fraternity brothers that used to live together in college, you know what I mean? And there's no, it doesn't appear to be any time between the two. So if you got convicted of that in college and then something else happened 30 years later, then you could go on a registry. So, that's my only concern with that. I don't unfortunately have an answer. Maybe you said somebody had some amendments. I'm hoping somebody else might, but that is something that I think would be, to the chairman's point, a little bit unintended consequence.
And that definitely would not be a consequence we would want. That is definitely not the intent of this bill. So I would love for us to find a definition that would exclude that. What I have here, as far as the current definition of family violence in the code, is between past or present spouses, persons who are parents of the same child, parents and children, step parents and stepchildren, foster parents and foster children. And I think this might be where the sticking point may be, or other persons living or formerly living in the same household. But yeah.
You want to go? Representative Panish.
The only problem with that is that you have people who are unmarried living together. And I think you want those people who are in a romantic relationship who there's violence between to be on the registry. What you don't want are just related people not in a romantic relationship. I think, or not having been in a romantic relationship.
Well, in the definition of family violence, it would include spouses. It would the parent, the person in the parent role, and the person in the child role, however they might be related as defined in the code. What we don't want to include is an example like the chairman gave, where you've got family members who happen to be related, even if they happen to have been living in the same household at some point, and have an altercation that
Do you want it to make it then a romantic relationship or a dating relationship? So, because that to me is what the essence of the domestic violence is. It's power and control. It's the entire
I
cycle.
think that is the essence of what we're trying to get to here. But there may be some people who are here to speak to the bill who have a lot of experience dealing with these situations in their professional life that may have some insight into it.
Yes,
that
and
we-
I like this bill. I just want it to be
No,
strong.
agreed. My whole intent here is to protect people. I know that we're mainly looking at women here, but men are also in abusive relationships too from time to time. And we're looking for a tool or a resource that could help them when they're deciding who they may want to be in a romantic relationship with, to look and see if they're dealing with a person who's had multiple domestic violence convictions. That's the intent. So however we can clean that up and make and preserve that intent, I am definitely open to that.
Okay. Number 4, Representative Neal.
Yes, so some of the things I was reviewing before coming here is looking at what Tennessee is doing with their definitions. But I know some of those recommending something like that would reverberate throughout the whole our Georgia code, because it's going to affect so much. But in order to accomplish a goal, I feel like a new definition will need to be established, whether it's intimate partner violence, something. Because if absent of that, I feel like there's going to be a lot of unintentional consequences.
Okay. See no other questions from members of the committee. At this time, we're going to take testimony. Chairwoman, if you want to slide over. Let's see. Have Betty Dale Williams. Come on down. There are 2 of you. Come on down.
Good afternoon. I'm Betty Williams. I'm the director of the Refuge Domestic Violence Shelter in Vidalia, Georgia. I support this bill. I serve 5 counties in Southeast Georgia. I've been working in this field for 23 years. I think this registry is much needed. Simply, Representative Hagan, when she said that about it's not just women, but men too. They can go on this registry when they're thinking about getting in a relationship. And what I like about this bill is there's 2 convictions. So with a conviction, I feel like there's been enough evidence put forth, that there was a conviction, because we know with TPOs, that's very much different from this conviction. And so she or he can make a decision after going on this registry to say, oh, he's had 3 convictions of domestic violence. Do I want to get in this relationship with him or her? And it really could, even if it saved 1 life, that's 1 life that we have saved with this bill. I would love to see it go forth. I would love for Georgia to be the 2nd state to pass such a bill. And I want to thank Representative Hagan for bringing it forth.
Absolutely. I'm Michelle Gertman, and I run 3 domestic violence shelters in South Georgia. I run Valdosta, which is a domestic violence and sexual assault center. And then I'm in Waycross, where I have the First Family Justice Center up and going, and I run a domestic violence shelter. And then I've been running Camden House St. Mary since last May. And so I have 16 counties in the great state of Georgia. And I want to tell you a few reasons why you should pass this bill. Because 70,000 victims made a crisis call last year to a shelter. 292,000 victims slept in a shelter bed last year. Almost 16,000 victims did not receive help because shelters are full. And 163 lives were lost last year due to domestic violence. And you'll hear from a survivor today that I got to meet very briefly. I said, "Why is this bill important to you?" And she said, "Because I don't want it to happen to anyone else." And I think that's what we have to get to, whether the definition needs to be changed or where we need to get to. But I want you to know that sisters and mothers fight, and mothers and husbands fight, and boyfriends and girlfriends fight from the cradle to the grave. And we see all the above. It's no respect of persons, and it's no respect of age. And so we see that all the time. And I stand before you today saying we're deeply honored to be here, but we want to protect the victims' rights. And I think that having someone that's been arrested twice, I think it protects, or not arrested, I said that, convicted twice, protect someone that may be arrested and convicted like a victim, because we know that victims are also arrested for domestic violence and they can be wrongly convicted as a perpetrator. So I think with it being a 2-time conviction, that is very rare and far between that is going to happen twice to one person to be wrongly convicted 2 times on the same charge. So I do think that House Bill 1142 establishes the domestic violence registry, and it helps us maintain that offender and know who they are, just like a sex offender registry. You want to know who's living. I have 7 kids, 6 girls. Don't you want to know if they're dating someone that has been accused or convicted of domestic violence? I would want to know that. I think survivors want to know that when they get back into a relationship. So I think it's very important that you take this bill in consideration. Whether you have to change some of the language on it, it's worth having for Georgia to have a first-time registry in domestic violence. After 31 years, to know that we're finally going to have somewhere that we can go and look as an advocate trying to file a TPO, or as a shelter understanding that we have someone that's been convicted. I think that's very important. When many women we serve eventually start rebuilding their lives, if someone they encounter has a documented history to repeat violence, that information would be helpful. Victims deserve awareness. Shelters deserve awareness. Communities deserve awareness. And transparency saves lives. And I think a registry is transparency, and I think that will help. Thank you.
Okay. See no questions. Thank y'all for
Thank you.
traveling all the way up here.